Use Jungian shadow. Work to become narcissist-proof. What if the very thing that makes you a target for narcissists is also your greatest source of power? If you're a deeply empathetic person, you know how draining it can be to absorb toxic emotions. It can feel like a curse. But the work of psychoanalyst Carl Jung offers a fascinating clue. Until you face your own shadow, you'll keep being a mirror for the darkness in others. This video will show you how to do that, not just to protect yourself, but to become truly unshakable. The problem. The empath's burden. If you consider yourself an empath, you know the feeling. It's more than just being sensitive. It's a profound and often overwhelming capacity for emotional attunement. You walk into a room and instantly feel the unspoken tension. A friend tells you a story, and their anxiety is suddenly sitting in your own stomach long after they've left. On the surface, this is a gift. But as we can see by applying Carl Jung's work without strong psychological boundaries, this gift quickly becomes a trap. While empath isn't a clinical term Jung used, it powerfully describes an experience that can turn you into a container, not just for your own feelings, but for everyone else's. You become a walking storage unit for the rage your boss couldn't express and the grief your partner won't acknowledge. Exploring this pattern through a Jungian lens reveals a disturbing tendency. It's often a trained response learned in a family where you were taught to normalize painful dynamics, doubt your own perceptions, and put everyone else's emotional needs first. This early conditioning can create what Jung called a compulsion to repeat. Unconsciously, you seek out these familiar dynamics in your adult relationships. And who is most drawn to a person trained to absorb pain, doubt their own reality, and offer endless forgiveness? The narcissist. They recognize on a deep instinctual level that you will serve as the perfect container for all the toxic emotions they refuse to see in themselves. You find yourself in draining relationship cycles, giving and giving, hoping your love will finally fix the other person. Instead, you end up exhausted, depleted, and feeling like you've lost yourself. This isn't a personal failure. It's the predictable result of a psychological dynamic where your boundary-less empathy has made you a target. You're not too sensitive. You're unconsciously playing a role that's costing you your soul, the agitation, the unseen dynamic. So, why does this happen? Why do you, a person filled with empathy, keep attracting those who seem to be your polar opposite? Applying Jung's work, the answer is both profound and unsettling. It lies in the concept of the shadow and its projection. The shadow, in Jungian terms, represents all the parts of yourself that you've repressed or disowned. Everything you decided is not me. For many deeply empathetic people who build their identity around being kind and patient, the shadow is often packed with the opposite qualities: anger, selfishness, the right to say no, and healthy aggression. These aren't evil, they're essential parts of a whole personality, but because you learned they were unacceptable, you pushed them down into the darkness of your unconscious. As Jung famously stated, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. When these parts of us remain unconscious, they don't just disappear, they get projected. We start seeing our own disowned qualities in the people around us. This is the secret of the magnetic pull between an empathetic person and a narcissist. The narcissist, who has built a persona of perfection, has a massive shadow filled with insecurity and shame. The empathetic person, who has often perfected the helper persona, has a shadow filled with their own unlived power and anger. The narcissist is unconsciously drawn to you because you're willing to carry their projected shadow, their shame, and emotional turmoil. You become the dumping ground for everything they can't face in themselves. In turn, you might be unconsciously fascinated by the narcissist's overt confidence and assertiveness, the very qualities living in your own shadow. Their ability to say no and prioritize their needs can feel like a missing piece of your own psyche. This dynamic creates a toxic merge, something akin to what Jung, borrowing the term from the anthropologist Levi Bruhl, called participation mystique. An unconscious dissolving of boundaries between self and other. You're no longer two separate people, but two halves of a dysfunctional whole. The narcissist outsources their feelings to you, and you are entranced by their projection of power. As Jung warned, someone who is unconscious of their own shadow will see their unacknowledged reality in the faces of others. This is the heart of the toxic bond. The turning point, introducing shadow work. If projection is the lock, then shadow work is the key. It's the most powerful tool for breaking this devastating cycle. So what is it? Despite the ominous name, it's not about indulging in negativity. Shadow work is the courageous process of bringing the unconscious into consciousness. It's the act of turning inward to reclaim the parts of yourself you have disowned. It's about making the darkness conscious, so it no longer runs your life from behind the scenes. As Jung put it, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. For the empathetic person, this means daring to look at the very qualities you've spent a lifetime denying. It means acknowledging your anger and resentment. It means admitting that part of you is sick and tired of being the endlessly patient, forgiving container. It involves recognizing that your niceness may have been a survival strategy to avoid conflict, rather than a purely authentic choice. This isn't about judgment, it's about integration. Jung insisted that the conscious personality must be the one to integrate the shadow. If you don't consciously engage with these repressed parts, they can erupt in moments of rage, burnout, or sudden destructive decisions, a phenomenon Jung called enantiodromia, where things pushed to an extreme flip into their opposite. Shadow work is the choice to stop running from yourself and the commitment to become a whole person, not just a good one. This is revolutionary. Your entire psychological structure may have been built on self-negation. Shadow work asks you to dismantle that and build a new foundation of self-acceptance. It's about realizing your anger is a signal that a boundary was crossed. Your desire to say no is an expression of self-respect. Your selfishness is actually necessary self-preservation. By doing this work, you take back your projections. You stop seeing your power in the narcissist and start finding it in yourself. You stop being a blank screen for their projections and become a solid, integrated person. The attraction dissolves, not because you learned a new trick, but because you're no longer a psychological match. They can no longer find a hook in you because you've taken back the parts of yourself where the hooks used to go. The solution. Practical steps for shadow integration. Okay, the theory is great, but how do you actually do this? Shadow work is a lifelong practice, but it begins with a few crucial, actionable steps. The first stage is recognition. You can't integrate what you don't see. This is about becoming a detective of your own psyche. Start by practicing radical self-honesty through journaling. Ask yourself these questions and write down the uncensored answers. What qualities in other people irritate me the most? That intense irritation is often a signpost pointing straight to a disowned part of your shadow. If someone's arrogance drives you mad, where have you denied your own right to be proud? If their selfishness feels like a personal attack, where have you abandoned your own needs? Think of a toxic person in your life. What part of you did they awaken? Instead of focusing on their behavior, look at your reaction. Did they trigger a deep fear of not being good enough? A feeling of powerlessness? That feeling is your shadow asking for attention. Acknowledge the times you've absorbed blame that wasn't yours or apologized for someone else's behavior. See the pattern not as a flaw, but as a program you are now choosing to overwrite. The second stage is integration. This is where the real work begins and requires what Jung called considerable moral effort, because it challenges your persona. This isn't about acting out your anger or becoming a jerk. It's about consciously acknowledging and holding these energies. Here's how to start. Dialogue with your shadow. Using a technique Jung called active imagination, find a quiet space and visualize the part of you that is angry or tired of giving. Give it a voice. Ask it what it needs. What does your anger want to protect? Listen without judgment. The goal is to build a relationship with these lost parts, to let them know they are seen. Redefine your negative traits. Reframe the qualities you've suppressed. Anger isn't just destruction, it's the energy of boundary setting. Selfishness isn't just greed, it is the act of honoring your own life force. By consciously integrating these, you don't become a bad person. You become a whole person, one who decides how to wield these energies. Practice embodiment. When you feel a surge of resentment, don't stuff it down. Feel it in your body. Is it in your clenched jaw, your tight chest? Breathe into it, acknowledge its presence. Say to yourself, I am feeling anger and it is allowed to be here. This practice stops the energy from being repressed and allows it to move through you. As Jung noted, a person who is unconscious of themselves acts in a blind, instinctive way, fooled by illusions when they see their own unconscious content projected onto their neighbor. By doing this work, you dismantle the illusion, the empowerment, boundary setting as a superpower. As you begin to integrate your shadow, something remarkable happens. Setting boundaries shifts from being a terrifying confrontation to a natural act of self-love. Before shadow work, you're afraid of being seen as mean or selfish, the very qualities you banished to your shadow. But once you've started to reclaim your anger and your right to say no, boundaries become an authentic expression of who you are. The energy shifts from pleading to declaration. When you start implementing these new, integrated boundaries, prepare for some pushback. A predictable pattern often unfolds in 3 phases. Phase 1. Exposure. When you first set a boundary, it exposes the unspoken rules of the relationship. The other person is shocked to find you will no longer be their automatic source of validation or emotional dumping ground. Phase 2. Testing. This is the critical part. The other person will unconsciously try to reinstate the old dynamic. They might escalate their demands, create a crisis to pull you back in, or guilt trip you. You've changed. You're so selfish now. This isn't a sign your boundaries are wrong. It is definitive proof that they are working. Their reaction is about them losing access to your emotional labor. Phase 3. Sorting. In this final phase, the relationship will either transform into a healthier one based on mutual respect, or it will end. It can be difficult, but the end of a relationship in this phase is not a failure. It is a revelation. It reveals that the connection was never based on genuine reciprocity, but on your self-abandonment. The awakened empath understands this backlash not as a personal rejection, but as a system correcting itself. When you withdraw your participation from a toxic dynamic, the game stops. You don't need to fight them. You simply stop playing. This journey of shadow work is one of the most profound you can undertake. It's a path back to yourself. If this message resonates with you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into psychological healing. And in the comments below, share one insight you've had about your own shadow. By sharing our experiences, we illuminate the path for each other, the transformed empath. So, what happens when an empathetic person integrates their shadow and masters conscious boundaries? Do they become cold and disconnected? The answer is the exact opposite. Your empathy doesn't disappear, it becomes surgical. You're no longer a sponge, passively soaking up every stray emotion. You become a finely tuned instrument, able to sense others' feelings with precision, but you are no longer compelled to take them on as your own. You can feel another's pain without needing to rescue them from it. You can understand their reality without sacrificing your own. This is the birth of the narcissist-proof empath. It's not an armor you put on, it is an integrated state of being. The narcissist's tactics, the gaslighting, the guilt trips, no longer find purchase. You can see the manipulation for what it is, a desperate attempt by an unconscious person to manage their own inner chaos. You feel no pull to participate. You respond not with reaction, but with a calm, unshakable clarity that is utterly baffling to them. This transformed state is where empathy evolves from a liability into a form of wisdom. You see the archetypal patterns playing out and understand that others' behavior is not about you, but about their own unhealed wounds. This allows you to have compassion from a safe distance without getting tangled in their drama. This journey is about moving from unconscious fusion to sovereign presence. It's about becoming a container for your own soul rather than a container for everyone else's toxicity. The path isn't easy, but on the other side isn't a darker version of you, but a whole one, grounded, clear, and free. You stop lighting yourself on fire to keep others warm, and instead, you become the fire itself.